Greetings and welcome, I'm Ash, and this is my review for Homeworld Deserts of Kharak, a prequel to the excellent Homeworld 1 which released back in 1999 and redefined the RTS genre with a focus on large-scale conflicts, compelling storytelling, and persistence between missions. Deserts of Kharak set out to continue that legacy, and despite the fact that the cool darkness of space has been replaced with the ever-encroaching desert, it does an excellent job of embodying everything Homeworld stood for. While you don't need to play through Homeworld 1 to enjoy Deserts of Kharak, longtime fans of the series will find plenty of small details and story points that gain immense significance when you know what will happen 100 years into the future. The same goes for the gameplay as well. It should be easily recognizable to anyone that played a Homeworld game, as some units are essentially a more rudimentary version of the ones found in the future and serve the exact same role. The Homeworld series is quite famous for its multiplayer battles, but to me, it was always about the story and the characters. I still vividly remember those first few missions in Homeworld 1 and how shocked I was at the scope of the devastation. So where exactly does Deserts of Kharak stand when it comes to storytelling? The events in Deserts of Kharak take place 100 years before Homeworld 1 and are centered around the search for the Prime Anomaly, a mysterious artifact that suddenly spiked with energy from deep within the constantly expanding desert. With Kharak slowly becoming uninhabitable and food riots spreading all over the globe, the coalition of Kith, or clans if you will, decided to send a single massive carrier into the desert in the hope of retrieving the artifact. This doesn't go over well with the coalition's neighbors, the Galcian Kith, who believe their god Sejuk has forbidden them from ever entering space, and if they ever did so despite his wishes, he will bring Kharak to a fiery end, so war inevitably breaks out. This is where you come into the picture as an unnamed commander who needs to ensure that the carrier Kapisi makes it to his destination. Each mission starts and ends with a short cinematic, which is either done through in-game cutscenes or for a rather beautiful blend of hand-drawn art and 3D or actual actors, I'm not actually sure. It is hard to explain the style in words, but as you can see, it is rather fetching and sadly not used as frequently as I hoped it would be. There are only a few main characters in the campaign, but they deliver a great performance and feel like actual people with doubts, anger, and desperation. Voice acting in general, besides a few oddballs, is top-notch, which is great given how much your units can blabber in the middle of a fight. Despite there being a menu option to tone down random chatter, there is unfortunately nothing to stop unit responses when you select them, which, if you're a player like me and use 6 control groups, starts to sound like someone's performing an exorcism in the middle of battle. On the topic of the story itself, it doesn't have the same scope or grandeur as Homeworld did, and I found it difficult to get myself invested into it, but over time it was the characters that had won me over. Around Mission 9, there's a very memorable moment where all hope seems lost as your plan fails and the crew is stuck in a scorching desert with dwindling water supplies. You can really feel the pain and desperation between each character as they attempt to salvage the situation and push onward into certain doom against an overwhelming enemy. And then the game throws a Deus Ex Machina your way, you cross incredible swaths of desert in a single cinematic, and the whole campaign ends shortly after. Throughout the entire story, your mission is set up as a desperate attempt. After each victory, you get a statistic of how much water your meager supplies have lost that day, and your actual progress is a series of small hops to a final destination so far away it doesn't even fit on the map. And then, in the final stretch, you speed across half of the map unimpeded, water is no longer an issue, and you have a super weapon on your side to conveniently fight the main baddie with. While I don't know if this is a fact, Deserts of Kharak feels like it was rushed during its final stretch in development, because the moment the story starts picking up and getting you invested into it, it enters a downward spiral and ends soon after. A real shame, because with a few more missions and a better ending, it could have been truly great, a real classic. While the story left me wanting more, the campaign gameplay, especially on the hard difficulty, was well balanced and most importantly, fun. At the core of your quote-unquote base is the carrier Kapisi, which functions as a drop-off point for resources, a mobile unit-producing factory, a landing strip, and as a gigantic battle fortress whose weaponry you can upgrade to the point where it becomes capable of taking on armies by itself. There are only 2 types of resources available, and each node contains only tiny amounts, so your carrier will be often on the move, which is where one of my main complaints with the campaign gameplay comes in. The carrier is so slow, yet so instrumental in your tactics that you will spend far too much time waiting for it to arrive. In multiplayer this isn't an issue since carriers have a speed upgrade, but in the campaign it is completely missing, thus leaving your entire army to progress at a snail's pace, in fear of entering battle with your main asset a kilometer back. That little flaw sticks out like a sore thumb because everything else is nice and fast paced. Your light assault vehicles can crisscross the map in under a minute, units are expensive but produce quickly, and ability cooldowns are so low you might get a chance to use them multiple times in a fight. Luckily, this is a problem that is easy to fix, on account of the fix already being in the game, so I do hope the carrier gets its speed upgrade in a patch near release, because as it stands, it's a bit silly. Even though the carrier is the biggest and meanest of your ships, the focus in Deserts of Kharak is instead on the various units you can build and upgrade. They are seemingly well balanced, cool to look at, and actually useful even in the endgame. For example, the first unit you will ever get is the LAV, a dune buggy that is so quick and small most attacks from much more powerful ships tend to completely miss them. What this means is that even in the final few missions you will be able to find areas for your LAVs to wreak havoc while your frontliners keep the enemy busy. My favorite unit, however, was the most basic armor tank, which comes with a surprisingly useful ability to launch smoke grenades. They might not sound like much, but when you can create a wall of smoke in front of you, the enemy artillery and battleships simply won't be able to find who to fire on, allowing your entire force to focus on the enemy front line. But the coolest part is that units are capable of ranking up and becoming much stronger than the default ones, so you really want to ensure that they survive for as long as possible, since you are getting twice the power for the same supply cost. And not just that, your entire fleet and upgrades persist from mission to mission, so you are heavily encouraged to not throw units away fruitlessly, because even with skilled play, the hard computer will slowly wear you down and you don't need to help it out. Some of the campaign missions can get pretty damn hectic, especially if you get into a 2v2 situation with over 50 ships on each side slinging everything they've got at each other, from missiles to ground forces and aircraft. And while it is a joy to behold, the performance does not keep up with these sort of moments. For the majority of the campaign, I was able to run around with everything on Ultra and be completely fine, but once the flashier late game ships started coming online and the screen filled with debris, holes in the ground and a flash of lasers, the FPS started to drop down pretty significantly. I've had big battles with more basic units and never experienced such issues, so I have a feeling it's due to the artillery cruiser's missile barrage, which fills the entire screen with rockets, smoke and holes that might cause this. You can get around the FPS loss by reducing settings such as shadow and effects, but it is something that we'll like to see patched as soon as possible. While the performance might not always be great, the graphics definitely do hold up, as Deserts of Kharak somehow manages to make endless stretches of desert feel unique and different. I'd still prefer it if there was more diversity in terrain, but with the limitations Deserts of Kharak has due to its story, it is pretty impressive how much mileage it got out of its sandy landscape. The ground textures look great from afar, but they tend to lose their charm once you zoom in really close to get a more cinematic view of the battle. The units, however, look great even up close, as they have a lot of nifty details put into them that you wouldn't even notice if you just stuck to the scanner view, essentially a simplified overhead view of the map, or just played zoomed out for the best tactical perspective. For example, the LAVs, the dune buggies I mentioned previously, will sometimes do cartwheels when struck by explosives, slide down hills when trying to turn after a fast descent, and so on. A lot of effort went into the units having their own quote-unquote personality, and it really shows. So far, I've only ever talked about the campaign, and while it does represent a significant chunk of the game, it is the multiplayer that will be the meat to the campaign's potatoes. And in a replica of the campaign's pros and cons, the multiplayer is fast-paced RTS fun, with plenty of different units, upgrades and tactics to choose from, yet only 6 maps in total. The maps aren't even that big, and they are literally set in a desert, a nicely detailed desert with starship wreckage, but a desert nonetheless, which begs the question, why is there only 6 of them? To compound this issue, there is only a single game mode besides Deathmatch, and that is the Artifact Collection mode, in which you need to pick up artifacts that spawn periodically in the middle of the map and escort them to faraway drop points. It is a very skill-intensive mode to play and rather enjoyable, but for a game with a 7-hour campaign, the multiplayer really needs to be a lot more meaty than this. It's such a shame because the multiplayer really is fun with the myriad of upgrades and units you have to juggle in between resource gathering, guarding your distant outposts from relentless LAV harassment, and so on. It contains everything that makes the campaign gameplay fun, but with even more decision making since you don't inherit upgrades and unit abilities from previous missions. The two races you get to play with, the Coalition and the Gelsian, are well balanced and similar enough that you will instantly understand how they work while still being unique enough to give birth to a completely different set of tactics. In short, the multiplayer mode works great and is fun to play, but much like the campaign, I feel it needed a month or two more to get fully fleshed out. Deserts of Karak has some very exciting and tactical gameplay filled with plenty of activatable abilities as well as ways for skilled players to distinguish themselves, and the story has potential to be truly great, but both sides of the coin are let down by a lack of content. I love Deserts of Karak, but there needs to be more of it. As it stands, I'm not sure I can recommend it to you at full price, because unless a patch comes really quickly after launch, you're going to be done far sooner than you might expect. At a discount or once a couple of patches roll in, I would say it is definitely worth your time, because as a game, Deserts of Karak is a great throwback to the RTS of old. Thank you guys for listening, and if you enjoyed this, please do leave a like, and that's helping me a lot. And if you would like to see more, you can either subscribe here, or you can check out the website linked down below. That one tends to be updated more frequently. With all of that said, I hope you guys have a nice day, and I'll see you soon. See ya!